Oh, this game is not a big fan of ever disconnecting my audio card, apparently. I think I just have to restart it now. Damn! Well, that's fine. It's fine. I need to start a new game anyway. Oh, I need to start the bot as well. There you are. Found you. Oh, I think the game's crashed. If only there was like a new version of this game. If only there was a new version of this game that didn't have problems. You know, if only. Does anyone have the hookup? Grim Fandango.exe. Terminate. Hello. Yeah, who is this? I'm not supposed to be here. Oh my god. Oh, that's loud. Ooh. I'm not even supposed to be here. I hope I don't jack off. It just puts you here, doesn't it? I don't think this is where the game started. I guess at some point, some years ago, I did a little test run of this to see how it worked, and I was like, oh, this works fine, I guess. There we go, main menu. There we go, perfect. Can I get my OBS on the right screen, please? Oh my god, I have no idea what I'm doing anymore. I have no idea what I'm doing. There we go. Excellent. Hello! Hey James, hello! Hey Hippa, hello, welcome! Yeah, it's been a little minute since I played. Since I streamed anything. It's been busy here. I was doing a lot of renovations suddenly, and suddenly I just kept working on the days I would stream on, and a stream just never happened. And then a couple weeks having guests and stuff. So no, not enough time for streaming. And actually, there won't be too much time for streaming in a couple of weeks again, because I'm gonna be traveling for a bit for the summer. But yeah, we'll be able to play something now. Let's play a little video game now. See if we can finish a video game before May, eh? I can't see the gorilla channel without thinking of monkey type beat. I do need some sort of monkey type beat, don't I? I need something here. I'm gonna retire the gorilla channel picture here at some point soon. I'm just too lazy. I'm just never getting around to it, but I need to do it at some point. The jokes, if it ever was a joke, is pretty old now. I need something else. Something that just says, we start now. Oh, I was thinking, I don't know about any Leo themes. I have no idea. Monkey type beat? I don't know. Uh-oh. Is that anything? Because it is. I have no idea. Leo's tune though, it's pretty good. It's pretty. But hey, Grim Fandango! I'm gonna play Grim Fandango. That should be a doable game in a month or so. And I've wanted to play this game for a very long time. And I just sort of never got around to it. The remastered version came out. I played that at some point. I guess now's a good time. Have I got all the stream things and set up? Yeah, set up properly before we start a new game. Looks like it. Dude, I even set the category correct. I'm even in the right game section, dude. Dude, I'm doing everything right tonight. Perfect, let's go. Erase saved game, I guess, yeah. Grabo. Who even is Manny? I don't even know. And a new game. Hopefully we don't get any problems this time around. Cross your fingers. Hopefully I don't need to close the game. Oh. That seems like a good start. Yeah, let me know if I need to adjust the audio in any way, shape or form. It does look a bit loud right now.
Sorry for the wait, Mr. Flores. I am ready to take you now.
Take me? Take me where?
Now, there's no need to be nervous.
Nervous? No. It's just your appearance. It's a little intimidating.
Intimidating? Me? but I'm your friend.
He's just wearing a
My name's
Halloween
Manny
costume.
Calavera. I'm your new travel agent.
I don't want a new travel agent. I want to go home.
You can't go home, Celso. You're dead. But you're not alone. Everybody here is just as dead as you. That's why we call it the land of the dead. Are you ready for your big journey?
No. What journey?
The 4-year journey of the soul. It is quite a big trip. And I can't lie to you, Celso. It could be very, very dangerous.
That's high-tech stuff. There's a circular computer.
To take that money you were buried with and buy a better travel package from us.
Probably plays no games though.
Rather cross the land of the dead in your own sports car? Maybe try a luxury ocean cruise? Or, if you led a very good life, you may even be eligible for a ticket on the number 9 itself.
The number 9?
Trains,
That's
yeah,
a
the ultimate
double-line
transport, even the
express
afterlife.
train. It shoots straight to the 9th underworld,
Can't beat it.
the land of eternal rest, in 4 minutes instead of 4 years. But very few people qualify. Let's take a look at your records.
Oh, maybe you shouldn't have told them about all the options before checking.
The bad news
Oops.
is the train appears to be just out of your reach, but I still got a couple of tricks up my sleeve here. Yaha! Yes, that's the ticket. The Excelsior line. Yes, she's a beauty. That compass in the handle will sure come in handy too.
A little
you're going
walking
to have
stick.
a great trip. Wish I was going.
Why don't you? You could give me a lift.
Oh, I can't leave here until I've worked off a little debt to the powers that be.
Community service, eh? Well, I guess there are some folks worse off than me.
Oh, I'll be leaving here soon enough. No thanks to dead and no commission low-life cases like yours, Menso.
Hey, Manny, the boss told me to tell you not to leave early tonight. He wants to talk to you about something when he gets back from his trip.
Tell Don not to worry. I'm not going anywhere.
Man, that stick looks really annoying to carry
Especially not
around.
with clients like that.
You didn't, go for like one that you could fold or something like that?
They don't qualify
Man, we
for
play like
anything good, so I
we're playing
can't sell
one
them.
shit travel agent here.
Can't work off my
Can't even
time.
get a foldable scythe. What an
I'm
amateur.
selling walking sticks to a bunch of burros for eternity. I need better clients. I need a real saint. I need a lead on a rich, dead saint.
Oh my god, I was so scared
¿Qué es esto?
when the audio stopped playing. Ooh. Is there subtitles we gonna put on? Do we gotta have the subtitles, please? Text mode, voice only? Voice and text. What does that mean? Who calls it voice and text? Who does that? I'm assuming that means subtitles. And yes, it is indeed the right time to be playing a LucasArts game, considering getting Monkey Island at some point, right? Monkey Island 3? Oh, I thought it was already Monkey Island 3.
To all agents from Office Manager Don Copel.
All right, you boneheads, thank your lucky stars and get
Boneheads,
to
you
your
get it.
friggin'
Because of
cars.
skeletons.
We have a mass poisoning on our hands. Too many dead to assign specific cases, so all clients are first come, first serve. So let's see some hustle out there.
Oh, it sounds like you could get a really good role in Hogs of War. Yeah, it follows Monkey Island 2, doesn't it? But there was a Monkey Island 3, and it was a different style, right? Because you had like the scum ones, the 1 and 2. I think that's what the engine was called. Like the very pixely DOS games. And 3 was like a totally different art style, right? Where's my inventory? Ah, there we go.
My scythe. I like to keep it next to where my heart used to be.
It also looks like the only place you could put it. It can fold, it just chose not to.
It's some sort of special work order.
Yeah, it's been many Monkey Island games, yeah. But I feel like someone called it like Monkey Island 3 or something, but I was like, I'm pretty sure there's already Monkey Island 3. I kind of lost track after 3. There's a 4 as well, which was like 3D. It looked pretty damn ugly. So how do I take up my scythe? That's a
My
thing, right?
scythe. I like to keep it next to where my heart used to be.
Pretty sure I could take up my scythe or something. How do I like rub an item next with something
I like to
else?
keep it next to where my
Oh,
heart
you selected, there we go. But the thing is though, he doesn't want to mess up his blade.
I don't want to mess up my blade.
gotta remember that about a character. Manuel? Manny? Doesn't want to mess up his blade.
My scythe. I like to keep
I'd put it back. There we go. Okay, that's it. I'm just trying to get used to the controls here. They're a bit strange compared to some other point and clicks I played. Because usually I'd have like all my imagery like on the screen at all times, right? In my HUD.
My message tube is full of nothing, as usual.
Of course. What's going on in here?
Picking that up.
Oh, the thing about this sort of style though is that it's harder for me to pick out like what's interactable. No, actually, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Like you know, in like some 2D things, they'll like have like a painted background and they'll put like sprites on the painted background so you can obviously see like what you're meant to like touch. I guess this is kind of the same situation. You got like a pre-rendered background here, so something like this does stand out a bit.
Better take these cards. It looks like a long day of solitaire for me.
You can tell, well, like what's interactable, maybe just because of like what's compressed or not, right?
Deck of cards just wouldn't help there. Deck of cards just wouldn't help there.
Hey, what am I carrying? Is that a deck of cards? I thought it was just saw like a little box. Deck of cards, sure is.
This deck of cards is a little frayed around the edges. Then again, so am I. And I've got fewer suits.
Frayed around the edges? Useless. Well, actually, wait a second. This is a Double Fine game, right?
Portable.
I guess we just playing Double Fine games recently. Then, because not that long ago we did Psychonauts, which is there's probably not that huge of a gap between Grim Fandango and Psychonauts, right? It's not like any way to see what's interactable or not. No. Right, let's just leave this office. If I can, please. Okay. The game does not automatically save. Gotcha. Save. What's the term again? Save early, save often. Living the Sierra life here.
Not a bad
7-year gap. Okay, so it's a little bit longer than I suspected it could be. Hello. Now let's inspect her first.
It's my boss's secretary, Ava.
It's my boss's whipping boy, Manny.
Buenos dias.
Manny, why aren't you at the poisoning?
What poisoning?
What poisoning?
The Code 3 gazpacho poisoning that everybody's at but you.
Gazpacho's
Why do I send
poisoning.
out memos if nobody reads them?
That's rude as hell. What was the poisoning again?
Where was the poisoning again?
Just ask your driver, for crying out loud.
I have a
He'll know.
driver? Am I supposed to be somewhere right now?
I forget. Am I supposed to be somewhere right now?
Manny, do I have to explain your job to you again?
Oh, they did stop numbering down, didn't I? Yeah, 3 is curse a Monkey Island, and like 4 is like escape from Monkey Island. Is that right? I'd like to hear a description, just for kicks.
No, but I like to hear your description of it, just for kicks.
Well, the Manuel Calavera that I know picks up people in the land of the living,
Dead people?
preferably, and he brings them here and tries valiantly to sell them the best travel package they qualify for. If he sells them enough premium packages, our hero will be free to leave the land of the dead. Until then, he and I are stuck here, having the same conversation over and over again.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna need some more clients then, so we can get the hell out of here. What's your job like?
Well, enough about me. What's your job like?
Like babysitting, except I don't get to watch TV.
What if we just skip town tonight? You and me, baby.
Well, thanks for the offer, but we'd never make it out of the city alive.
But
In one piece, I mean.
I bet I could get you out if I really tried.
Oh, Manny, look at you. You're a trapped soul and you don't even know it.
Always shed this suit. Just run out of here. What's there to stop me? I'm a pile of bones.
Why do some clients qualify for better travel packages?
They led good lives,
¿Qué traes? How do you define a good life?
better than yours and mine.
Well, if you just, drink the really expensive poison, maybe that'll do it.
So what did you do
You'll
in
find
life
it a
to get stuck
gazpacho in the
here?
middle of the
What I
afterlife.
did back in the fat days is none of your business. You know the rules.
Ooh, okay, we're in the loop. We're in the conversation loop. I gotta get out. But what a message for
Any
me?
messages for me?
Besides the one about the poisoning,
Yeah.
I only have one other message for you, Manny. I'm not your secretary. I don't take your messages. So get it through
Wait,
your
actually,
thick skull
wasn't
and
he
stop
literally
forwarding
a
your phone
secretary?
to me.
All right.
But not my
Sounded more
secretary,
like
right?
more messages to me.
Like my boss's secretary.
In my heart, though, you're still my secretary.
Rude.
Manny, what are you talking about? I was never your secretary, even when you were on top. I got one boss, same as you, Don Copel.
Come on, I know you work for another man besides Don.
What are you talking about?
I know you take.
How suspicious.
Sometimes.
Ah, Manny, just
She
beat
just
it, will you?
admitted it.
Just one more question about my job.
Manny, you know what to do. Stop playing dumb just to flirt with me.
So, you going to the Christmas party?
After the spectacle you made of yourself last year, I wouldn't miss it for the
He
world.
would be horrible at the Christmas party, wouldn't he? I think we're in a bit of a conversation loop, so I gotta hit the bricks. I gotta get out of here. I'm escaping this
Okay,
loop.
You show those bricks a lesson.
It's time for these bones to go rattling. I just got an achievement for something, though. I guess that shows how much I tested this game for. Oh, bye, car. See ya. Yeah, she's the Don's boss. Don Corleone, or whatever his name was. Not as hers is, because they are. It's an odd way to park a car, but probably better than how we do it, right? I don't know why you have all this space, though. And you're gonna have your bat cars. Dude, why doesn't Batman store his cars like this? Wouldn't that make sense? I feel like at some point you should go to the Batman, you should go to the Batcave, and you should just have the Batmobile hanging by the Bat clothesline like that.
Hey, service.
It's just a very Bat-like thing to do. He's huge!
Oh, sorry, sir. I didn't expect sales agents usually don't come over to this part of the garage.
Nice art.
Nice hut.
Yeah, I wonder how nice it would seem to you if you were trapped in it all day like me.
You don't seem too bothered by it. You're made of jelly. That's totally fine. You just shrink in there. You got compression power. You're saying fast and like being in zips. They love it.
If you hate your job, why
Yeah,
don't
just
you
quit, bro.
That's
Just
not your
move.
job.
Just move to
That's
another
created
town.
to do. If I get any farther away from cars than this, I'll get sick and die. It's like I'm not happy unless I'm breathing in the thick, black, nauseating
Oh, no.
fumes.
J.K. Rowling wrote this repairman.
Can't imagine.
Oh, it's revenge, then curse, then escape and tales and return. Yeah. Return is the one that hasn't been released yet. Yeah. So much Monkey Island, dude.
I'm Calavera. Manny Calavera.
My name's Gladys. I don't get many
Gladys.
visitors. Hey, I got a message for a Mr. Calavera.
Oh.
Your driver said that Mr. Hurley said that he could have the rest of the day off.
Domino sent my driver home?
Yeah, wasn't that nice?
I see. Hurley's a bit of a rival in here, isn't he? I see what's happening here. We've been sabotaged. Looks like I need a new
Looks like I
driver.
need a new driver.
Oh, I would agree with that. Yes, you do.
You're driving?
Hey, you a driver?
Me? Ha! No. I don't ride them. Just wrench them.
Well, it seems like it would be within your deal, though. You'd be next, inside a car. You know? If you can't be away from cars, isn't the next best thing to be inside a car?
You want to be my replacement driver?
Me?
Oh, he would love to.
No,
Okay.
sorry, can't. Rules.
Time to get the rules breaker t-shirt.
Come on, Gladys. I need you to be my driver.
No, I can't. I'm too big.
I saw you shrink into that hut there.
You're not too big. You're just right.
No, they told me again and again, I'm too big to drive.
Liars.
You're not too big. You just have a self-image problem.
A what?
Repeat after me. I am not fat. I am thin. Women find me attractive.
Hey, I never said I was too fat for the ladies, just the
Oh
cars.
no.
The
I didn't know what I say
ladies
every day to myself.
Just fine.
He's not supposed to know. No one's supposed to know. That's why I have no mirrors.
Screw the rules. Come with me.
No, I don't want to get in trouble again. They said one more strike and I'm out.
Got to play with baseball rules around here. If it was some sort of skeleton society, then the sort of national sport would be baseball, right? You know, you have a bat on you at all times. You have a ball with you at all times. Just if you have like you get a low rank Billy Boy skeleton, just take his head or whatever bones. You play with those. Gambling. They literally have bones on them to roll.
You're not too big. The
So much
cars are just
potential
too
there.
small.
Yeah,
skeleton
those
sports.
dang compact cars. Hey, that gives me an idea. I could alter your car just a bit with just a quick torch job to let out the seams, you know? But I'm not allowed to modify the cars without a work order from upstairs. I could lose my job.
Quick
A
torch
work
job,
order,
eh?
huh?
Yeah. I can't torch anything
Best
bigger
kinda
than a
torch, though.
cigarette without one of these signed by the boss himself.
Hey,
Boss.
that's my line. Getting people to sign. Back in a snap.
Yeah, too small. I'm not too big. Everything around here is just too small.
Now you're thinking. Now you got the right perspective. I got an achievement for talking to that guy. Did I just get an item for that?
I've got to get this work order signed.
That's the work order. What is DOD? Department of Death? Gotta be. That's gotta be it. Beat it out.
It's a tool cabinet.
Time to put us inside of it. Yeah, I played the special editions of 1 and 2 as well. Special editions of Monkey Island 1 and 2. They are really great games. Work perfectly. I was a big fan of it. And I played the originals as well. Like the DOS versions. And I had a good time with them. But the special edition was really good too. And I actually quite enjoyed the art style they went with for this as well. It's really fun to change art style interchangeably as you progressed. I ended up playing a lot of it with the new art style. It's pretty neat.
I've got to get this work order signed.
At least I remember it being. Then I guess it was different. So I
Got to
enjoyed
get
it.
this work order signed. Eva, I really need the boss to sign this work order.
I'll give it a shot. Mr. Copel, I've got Manny Calavera out here to see you.
Didn't I say no interruptions today?
Sorry, Cal. Maybe tomorrow.
That's too late.
Oh yeah, like you're going anywhere.
Okay, I gotta
Big Mr. Bossman doesn't want to be disturbed today.
disturb him somehow. Yeah, Halo did the flipping between old and new style well as well. I enjoyed that, especially since I remember there being some visibility problems in the Halo versions. So we played a new one for a while until we just couldn't see certain like paths and stuff, and we just went to the old version and was like, oh, that's where we go. Like things were just like way more signposted in the old version somehow. So we enjoyed going back and forth.
The driver demons operate this somehow, and the company won't tell a salesman how it works.
Can I just leave? Can I take the Excelsior line myself?
People have tried, but they never came back. Not picking that up.
What does this button do? I guess this is a pickup and it doesn't have a
There
line
are
for it.
lights for wash, rinse, wax.
Okay. I think that's it in the garage. It's just Glorious in here. Glorious should go live in Elden Ring where everything is made for actual giants to live in. Any From Software game is good for giants. Like, whenever you explore any area in any From Software game, like, the doors are this enormous Everyone's got a massive chair to sit in. Enormous bridges. Everything is just huge. Big old lava clubs as weapons. What the hell is this camera angle? This isn't my
Domino's
office.
door is locked.
Domino. Okay. Alright, so I'm back in my office. I didn't look at my computer before. My Skeleputer, which no doubt has no games on it. Is there no way to run and do these actions?
Not portable.
What? I'd like to interact with my computer. Can I only do it from this camera angle? What?
Here's Celso's file. That walking stick was too good for him.
We did him a favor. Giving him a walking stick. Alright, so I guess the computer is not too important right now then.
My computer gives me instant access to our database of deadbeats.
Is that so? So, what do we have in inventory right now then? We got
It's some sort of special work order.
special work order? What? Hang on, this is a different work order, isn't it? Let's see. So I got this. Yeah, that's the one I'm trying to get signed. This work order. What the hell is this?
It's some sort of special work order.
Thank you, but what is it?
Oh, Manny. Just take the sentences one word at a time. You'll get it.
What?
Oh, Manny. Just take the sentences one word at a time. You'll get it.
Is she just asking me to read it myself? It's blank.
It's some sort of special work order. It's
I
some sort
can't
of
read
special
it.
work order.
To all agents from...
All right.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Thank your lucky stars and get to your friggin' car. We have a
Ah, the mass poisoning thing,
too
yeah,
many
yeah.
dead to assign specific cases, so all clients are first come, first served. So let's see.
Yeah, but I don't have a
Whatever
car.
you say, Jefe.
What the hell is this card thing about?
I don't feel like pitching cards right now.
Okay. Could I play cards with you?
Manny, what are you doing?
Just marking cards, honey.
Why did I do that? What?
I don't feel like pitching cards right now.
Why did you do that? Why did you just punch a bunch of holes in your... Okay. Can I punch holes in this?
That won't help it get signed.
The hell? I feel like I accidentally may have sold something
The boss to
eventually.
sign this work order.
I'll give it a shot. Mr. Copel, I've got Manny Calavera out here to see you.
Didn't I say no interruptions today?
Okay. I feel like she's the one stopping me from going in here, right?
Big Mr. Bossman doesn't want to be disturbed today.
So I need maybe to get her out of the way.
This card's full of holes.
Why? Why is it full of holes? Oh, I still got my whole deck.
This deck of cards is a little frayed around the edges.
Can I-
And again, so am I.
Can I
I've got
punch
little
holes
suits.
in even more cards?
Any more holes and it would fall apart.
No, okay, I only need one. Well, I guess I look around for areas where a card with a bunch of holes is gonna be useful? Weird. Is it like maybe like a music box or something around? I can use this.
I couldn't play this card there. I couldn't play this
Time
card
to
there.
rub my items up against all the things I see. I'm actually not too sure what my current like interactables are even. Like there's a secretary ever.
Domino's door is locked.
Oh, I don't suppose I can actually use this card to enter this door somehow. I mean, I don't see why the holes would help, but maybe?
Domino's door is locked.
Nope. Yeah, so she's interactable. This is door. This door here. Any like things? Yeah, nope.
Big Mr. Boss.
I don't feel like pitching cards right now.
I can't like
Mr.
interrupt
Bossman
the,
doesn't want
the
to
door
be
in different
disturbed
ways. I can
today.
only like, walk through it. Do you want this card with holes in it?
Maybe card tricks some other time when I'm not so busy.
Good thing. And this door is just... Oh, okay. And there's 2 doors. Where does this lift hill lead? Okay, so that's the garage. Sure. Where does this lead? Oh, okay, okay. Here we go. I haven't been here.
It's locked.
Hello?
Yeah, right. How's it hanging? Ah, the old head of the department.
Suppose not. Kind of looked important, considering it had the interact options on it, but I guess nothing. Is that a
Let's
menu?
see. Where am I on this?
Oh, it's like a building menu, I guess.
Hurley, Junior Sales Associates. That better not be me.
Might be.
Let's see. Junior
No one seems to
Sales
respect us very
Associate.
much.
It's
It might be
locked.
us.
There she is. The number 9.
Number 9. Love a good train game. But everyone's got aspirations of riding the train. Oh. Oh, I may just leave the office. Okay. Gotcha. I thought maybe I was locked into the office until I could
No parking. Climb
get the
car
driver.
pickup only.
I don't suppose I can just drive the car
We
myself,
can't
can I?
operate cars. That's how they keep us from skipping town.
Well, just, why did you just not do it then? You know, well, not follow the rules, I mean. You know, you could just... That's the whole point of a car, right? Who's gonna catch you if you're just driving away from them? If shit sucks, hit the bricks. You can just run. This is a very suspicious ball here.
I don't like the way that eye is looking at me. Hello?
Hello? It's like a camera.
Not picking that up.
Someone's watching that. Is that the garage door for the
Huge.
car?
I can't open it.
Probably. Maybe. Can I climb that? Must be able to climb that. It's a lot of curtains or whatever someone's tied there. Oh my god. It goes all the way to the top. Oh, guess I just climb up. There goes nothing. Let's go. Oh, please render the whole thing. Hacks. Absolute scam artists. Connors. Didn't render the whole climb. Ridiculous. Hey, speaking of Halo,
Looks like the boss is
have you
gone.
seen the Halo TV show? There's like multiple episodes of that now, isn't there? I've not been paying attention to it. I just know that it exists, and it sounds like something that has to be bad, right? It has to be bad.
There's nobody in Domino's office.
Ooh.
Picking that up.
So we could just go in there. I have also heard that you can see Master Chief's ass. Yes, that's the main thing I've heard about the Halo TV show.
It looks like Don's rigged his computer to automatically answer his intercom.
Ah, Don's not even here, dude.
Not picking that up.
Okay, so I just need to like rig this to instead automatically accept my work order then. Beep, boop, beep, boop, 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 boop. Oh, there we go. Ah,
Just
cripes,
change auto
Ever.
response here.
Ah, cripes, Ava, just sign it yourself, will you? I'm busy.
There we go. I think I fixed that. Sure did. You know what? I was frankly more interested in Master Chief's ass than his face anyway.
Memo.
And everyone knows that Halo without
Work
the mascot
orders
is
were
actually a
signed by
woman
my
as well.
office,
Everyone knew that.
And are not exchangeable among salesmen. Swapping, selling, and specially stealing work orders will result in severe disciplinary action.
Just like the Metroid.
I would love to search Don's office right now, but I'm late for the poisoning.
What the hell is this? It's an arch of boxes. Madame John Halo. Exactly.
If I go out
Madame
that way,
John Halo.
everyone will know I was snooping around in here. I would love to search Don's office right now, but I'm late for the poisoning.
I guess I got everything I needed from this office, right? Whoop, 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 whoop.
I would love to search Don's office
Yeah,
right now.
he's just
More
saying the
than
same thing about
time to
everything. Yeah.
ransack.
Bye. Gotta be. Wait, what am I doing? What am I doing? Oh, I guess the implication is I can try throwing that, but I'm gonna miss, right? Yeah. No, stop. Okay, good, thank you. I thought I was gonna try throwing it again. Looks like a hatch here. It's definitely a hatch. You can even hear like the sound of walking on different material. Let's get a work order signed on. Hang on, isn't it this area I'm trying to get into? Like this little parade here? No, maybe not. It's just a place I can go to. Balloons?
Hey, what's going down, clown?
Hey, back off, suit. I'm practicing.
Oh, I'm gonna do it all for the Clussy here. I just want to walk through your tent so I can see the parade, please.
I want to see the parade.
Well, walk through someone else's tent, all right? Do I look like a turnstile to you?
Yes, yes you do.
Can you teach me how to do that?
Well, since you're a beginner, why don't you practice the first step?
Which is?
Blow.
Bang.
Ah, pop another one. Lousy bony fingers.
Oh, bad fingies. Oh. It's actually a clue though. I know about a puzzle in this game. And there is actually a clue to it. Quite subtle though. Seems like the balloons scare the birds, eh?
Practicing what?
Wringing your neck. What does it look like?
Twist me up one of them, huh, fella?
Yeah. Twist this, all right?
Rude.
Bet you can't do a cat.
Shows what you know, buddy. I can do anything. I can do birds, amphibians, famous poets. Go ahead. Name one.
Robert Frost.
Trying to stump me, eh? Ta-da!
Yeah, I guess that's Robert Frost. Yeah. Is that the one of Nido?
Some of my finest work, don't you think, Sparky?
I don't know how useful this balloon of Robert Frost is.
My kid wants another balloon animal.
Jeez, what now?
I think I don't want a dead worm.
Heck, that's easy. There's no limit on those.
No limit on those films. Oh, there it is.
It's a deflated balloon.
Oh, okay. So I can just build this myself. Perfect. Tricked clown to giving me a free balloon. What a moron. Some festival, eh?
Some festival, huh?
Yeah, pretty busy. My carpal tunnel syndrome's really acting up.
But you don't have any tendons.
Yeah, well, you don't have a tongue.
Yeah, but
That
you have a
doesn't seem to
tendency
shut
to
you
be a
up, now
jerkhead.
does it?
I have to go. That sound makes me want to kill somebody.
You too?
That's how he died. That's the tragic fate of every clown. It's like the brown noise, you know, but it's like the red noise, the clown noise. to really send people into rage when you're trying to do your work. They just friggin' go up to you and slap you into the afterlife, telling a joke. Topical. That's politics. Oh, I can get myself my thing signed now. These camera angles, not always the best, are they? Oh, I was thinking like, what the fuck is wrong with this hotkey? Why can't I press V to select? No, it's U, isn't it? God damn it. But also, like, why U? What are these hotkeys?
I'll give it a shot.
Although,
Mr. Copel, Mr. Calavera has something out here that he says he needs your signature on.
Ah, cripes, Ava, just sign it yourself, will you? I'm busy.
got it.
You'll have to excuse him, Manny. It's probably a really hard crossword puzzle he's got in there today.
They get really tough.
Eva, I'm impressed. I had no idea you had this kind of power.
Well, we all have our secrets.
That's not how that works. Isn't the whole thing that like, oh, you have the working lighter, so you offer them? Not like, oh, you're too bad to use a lighter. Allow me. Clearly this person that smokes has no idea how to use a lighter.
Hey, I look good in this, don't I?
Yeah, well, they say black is slimming.
I'm driving, yeah! I'm driving!
Hey, I'm driving here. Beautiful. You look great, darling.
I could have walked faster than this. Híjole, I'm gonna miss the poisoning.
I don't know what he's talking about because he's just driving in darkness, in the void. Oh, it's a land of living.
Domino.
Goddamn domino.
The living
Chad skeleton. Oh, I thought that was a big bit of bread there. What is that? That's body bag, yes.
Bound only by the paper-thin wrapper of mortality, a soul here lies, struggling to be free, and so it shall, thanks to a bowl of bad gazpacho and a man named Calavera.
But this is a bad client. This is gonna help us at all.
Nice bathrobe.
Thank you. Made it myself.
But we offer several travel package upgrades if you'd care to.
Cut the yap. I want something cheap where I can get some rest. Now that's it.
Oh my god, he's tiny. Little guy.
I could make this car a little faster if you wanted.
Yeah, whatever.
Oh yeah, slam the front into the weeds, tub the rear end, dual blowers popping out of the hood.
Whoa, we were a wooga.
You'll get plenty of rest this way, Mr. Martinez, and you'll be safely padded by the foam created when these two chemicals mix, like this.
On second thought, I want to upgrade my package.
Sorry, Bruno, but you didn't qualify for anything better. But here, have this complimentary mug.
No, wait. Can't you find me something where I can move my legs?
You know I'd like to, Bruno, but my boss is a real hard-ass.
I gotta be a hard ass when I got lazy sickle wavers like this jolly boy working for me. Manny, you couldn't find a sale at a yacht club.
I got a sale right here.
I'm talking premium sales, Calavera. Like the kind Domino makes.
He's jacking him on sales though. What am I supposed to do?
Clients you're sending me.
Hey, now you're blaming the clients? I've had it with you, Manny. If you haven't bagged a premium before the next sales report comes in, you're out. Out on the street, no job, no way to work off your time. Just your fancy suit and your big smile and a whole lot of time to kill.
We gotta buy this guy some pictures of Spider-Man.
Calling a scumbag? Why, I oughta...
I'm sick of waiting around for a good lead. Like it's gonna fly in here tied to a brick. It's time to take one.
Just yoink a good sale. What if we just kill some? Just find a real cool dude and just kill him. Bag a good deal. Good commission. I mean, we peace out. Wait, what do I even do now? Oh, this door's open. Domino. No, that's a domino, is it? I don't know.
Well, at least you're not hitting the bottle anymore.
Hey,
He's
Kelly,
sweating.
how you doing?
I didn't even do that.
So, how'd you make out of the poisoning?
Well, let's just say that Sister Calabaza has a secret passion for trains.
You got a nun?
Hail Mary.
And you sold her a ticket on the number 9 train.
Choo-choo, little buddy. Say, how'd you score?
It's really like a sweat tie on his back.
I got 2 nuns, actually.
Hey, that reminds me of this really funny joke.
Heard it. I want to ask you a question.
Shoot, slugger.
Can I have one of your clients?
Sure, Cal.
Oh, thank
As
you.
soon as I get one I think you could handle.
I can handle anything you got, especially if that's your best right jab. Why do you get all the good clients?
You're asking the wrong guy. You should be taking a good long look at the man in the mirror.
No thanks. I don't enjoy that the same way you do.
I never gotten that much good advice from MJ. I think I'll skip on that.
Is it hard to kiss up to the boss so much when you got no lips?
Hey, I got all the lip I need. I get it from you.
What did you do to get this job?
You mean what's my secret to success?
No, I mean, how did you screw up and get stuck here at the DOD? What sin did you commit, and how long are you gonna have to work here to pay it off?
Well, I could easily ask the same question of you.
But I don't know the answer. I still don't know what I've done.
Well, how convenient. Then, neither do I.
He knows. But how? Why don't we know? Did we get memory wiped? What happened?
I want to tell you something.
Good. Go on and let it
You
all
can just
out,
tell them.
Manny.
You don't have to
There's no
do
reason
the
for you to
intro.
Be afraid of me.
Skip the preamble.
I think we should team up. Be partners.
Oh, Manny, I would, but I'm too intimidated. I could never be partners with someone who was so much more of a man than me.
Oh, come on. I've seen your wife.
I
I
think you're up
think
to
you're
something.
up to something.
Yeah, I'm up to about 4 premium sales this week.
You know, this used to be my office.
Yeah, I know. I found your name on some comic books in the desk.
I want my office back.
Don't worry, you'll have years and years to enjoy it after I get promoted out and you're still here.
Yeah, well, that sounds nice. Kind of, you know? We're future proof. He's just keeping the office warm for us. Isn't that nice?
I want to punch you in the mouth.
Oh no, not the Christmas party all over again.
That's how we embarrass ourselves at a Christmas
What
party.
happened at the Christmas party?
Blacked out on the whole thing, huh? Maybe you should switch to lemonade, kid.
Well, you sound pretty out of breath.
But that's pretty good.
So I'm gonna blow.
Always a pleasure, Cal.
Oh, hope you don't mind I just look at your office for a little bit. Oh, this should have all information about his clients, right?
Hey, Dom. What's your screensaver password?
Get away from my computer, Manny.
No, I'll just have a drink, thank you. Just roasted it by hitting the bottle on the job, and we just did the same without even blinking, because we have no.
Get out of there, Calavera.
Yeah, we have no eyeballs. But also, if we did, we wouldn't do it. He just leapt at the opportunity to drink from the bowl. I'm taking the bowl with me, actually. Nope, I'm just having another drink, actually. Never mind.
Hey, get out of there, Calavera.
Moon Knight? Mirror Knight? Dark Souls 2? Great game. You know, if you put your
I think
invader
Don would
sign
call the
outside
company
the
shrink
boss
if I
door,
left through the window.
sometimes you get summoned into the boss fight from the Mirror Knight's mirror. Did you know? Gaming. But anyway, that's just a theory. A game theory. Nice mural got in the ceiling. Normal gamers would never spot that, because they never look up, but I do. I will honor your bean transaction, sir. I will seize this Dark Souls tomfoolery. I'm honorable with my bean purchases. Thank you for your beans. And I'm gonna need those for when anyone decides to spill all the beans. Yeah, I need to do something about the beans. We need some bean options. You know? Everyone's just sitting on a lot of liquid beans right now. I'm gonna need people to liquidate those beans into some goods and services. Consequences will never be the same once you spill those beans. You're gonna be living in a bean-free world with all the beans spilled everywhere.
I think Don would call the company shrink if I left through the window. Not picking that up.
Oh, this has this password on
card
it.
there.
What's the deal with this card? Did it just like zip? Did I just
I
zoop?
couldn't play this card there. I don't feel like pitching cards right now. Not portable. Hey, Don, get away.
Yeah, okay. I can't do much about this computer or this room, really, can I? Guess we talk with what's his face again? Giuseppe? Guillermo? Gizmo? I don't remember his name. You know, in the basement, the garage. I gotta talk to him. And maybe he's got some information. Oh my god, this camera go. Beep boop beep boop 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 boop. Hacking into his computer, finding out password.
Before the black marks burn into my screen.
Never mind.
I don't want to reread the old files. It'll just make me sad.
Alright. I guess Eva might have something new for me. Hello, Eva. Some time has passed. Oh, I see you have a little bit of a paper thingy on your desk. That's new. What's the deal with that?
Hey, you missed a great poisoning.
Yeah, and you missed a great client. Domino came back from there with a nun.
Híjole, I got a tiny little man with a mean temper and no commission.
Well, at least you don't work for one.
Wow, rude. No. She doesn't work for me. Come on, driver.
I can't find my driver.
Manny, you know what to do. Stop playing dumb just to flirt with me.
No, I really can't find my driver. Just sounds like you're projecting it, buddy. What's that door? It's so cursed. What's that door? Who does that? That's crazy. Oh, no. That's just in front of the door. It's just in front of the door. It's not a Tetris door. Okay, it's fine. I thought it was a fucking Tetris door for a second. Like a lost game of Tetris door as well. Every time you open the door, you're reminded that one time you fucking died in Tetris.
Where is everybody?
Oh, Manny, did you forget what day it is today?
Oh man, did I come in on Saturday again?
It's the Day of the Dead. Everybody's back in the land of the living, visiting their families like we should be.
I see.
Why aren't you visiting your family today?
Ah, the boss is here, so I gotta be here. How about you, Cal?
No one back there I want to see.
And you don't want Domino here alone, getting all the good leads.
That too.
Precisely. Oh, there should be something good for me then somewhere, if everyone else gone, right?
Busy as ever, I see.
I'd have more work to do if you had more clients.
Ouch. Any good gossip?
Well, I heard Domino got a raise.
Por favor, tell me some good news, why don't you?
I still
That's a
love you.
good
I
gossip.
really need, belleza.
Manny, if you don't mind, I've got a lot of filing here to do.
Right. I te watch you.
Gotcha. Maybe the floating thing wasn't the projection after all. I guess they got a thing going. These cute skellies. Can I... you got a thing though?
Can I take your whole...
Ha! I doubt you could take my half punch.
Mind if I use your whole
Word
punch?
play.
Knock yourself
I got
out.
it.
Thanks.
Gets the aggressions out, doesn't it?
Yeah, feels good. You got an achievement for
It's a
that.
whole punch.
I can't believe this is a hole punch. I can't believe it. It's a fucking rectangle. It's a bunch of rectangles put together to make a long cube. Whatever long cubes are called. This is this is not a hole punch. Time to make a racket. Why would I need, can I need like static electricity for something? I can rub my, my balloon up to things? Yeah, long cube. Exactly, that's what the mathematicians call those shapes. The long cube. Let's go to the garage. Hey, Giuseppe. Wait, what? Where's the office? Oh my god, it's huge down here. Why is it so huge down here?
It's locked.
What?
This sign says, I'm at the junkyard. Woo!
Oh. Nice of you to do an impression of
Now, when there's a
who
door.
wrote the nerd as well, so I had an idea who did it.
Not
Thank
picking
you,
that
man.
up. It's locked.
Oh, you're making a racket on me. Why is this place so huge, dude? Junkyard. I think that just means he's gone. I guess he's good leaving. I'm out of here. I'm dipping. Dominic doesn't seem to be. Oh, hello.
You and your fancy suits and your nose holes way up in the air, sticking your empty beer
That's
bottles down
how
the message tubes.
heads work
How
on
fancy
humans.
is that? Huh? Don't you boys upstairs realize the tube switcher is a sophisticated and delicate piece of machinery?
Huh?
Do you
Tube
think
switch,
you're
eh?
better than me?
No.
Good.
I'm gonna switch some tubes. I'm gonna take Dom's tube. Tube. Oh, I can use these still? Goop. Mix that with this goop. And then you get
That smell.
this goop. And then I pick that. Okay. Ungrateful for the goop? You just swat it away. It's messed up, dude. Rub the balloon on the goop, please. Maybe something happened. No, get the fucking balloon out of here. Let's fill this balloon here with some goop, eh?
That's not what balloons are for. I don't got the
Gotcha,
lungs for
okay.
it.
I guess it was too much to ask. We could use this to cut the goop into nice like slices, but not here. I don't want to mess up my blade.
Deck of cards just wouldn't help there. I've already got one card out, and I'm not dealing more. I've already got one card out, and I'm not dealing more until there's money on the table. I couldn't play this card there.
Alright, just swap
I don't feel
this
like bitching
junk out of
cards
here.
right
Just
now.
strain it straight onto the floor, don't I?
it's a lump of our packing foam. No thanks. That stuff smells terrible, man.
Okay, it doesn't want to pick it up. Gotcha. Okay. It smells terrible. It's you can't see it in this this camera angle, but there's a huge pile of foam rendered beautifully right in behind this table here, man. It's beautiful. You just can't see it.
You in one of these? Must have picked them up already. I don't need the hernia. For those who enjoy no hassle travel. Bruno, you in one of these? Must have picked them up already. Bruno, you in one of these? Must have picked them up already.
You might half understand Mahjong now. Oh, this poor guy. You think he half understands Mahjong? This poor guy. Ooh, the tube machine.
The wheel won't turn and the door won't budge. Not picking that up. That wheel should open it.
Wait, hang on, what did he say about that?
The wheel won't turn and the door won't budge.
Okay, did need to oil that or something?
As a rule, I never touch anything more sophisticated and delicate than myself.
Oh god, this room is loud. Let's turn that down for myself a little bit.
That's not on fire.
The thing you gotta know about this dude is that it's not on fire.
That's not on fire.
I got a fire extinguisher now. Well, if I want to foam something up. No, we finally got the not on fire thing. We were knocked it. Nice. I know what to oil this thing up a bit. Make it squeaky clean. There we go. Yeah, I always wondered if that was on fire. And it turns out this whole time, it was in fact not.
It's the sophisticated and delicate hub of all communications here in the Department of Death. Can't reach. Not picking that up. Can't reach.
I don't suppose I'm gonna reach it with my scythe, am I? Thing is though, dude, is I do not want to mess up my blade.
Not right now.
Not right now. How about if I do it right here? Is that fine?
Not here.
Not here. Not here. I'm gonna need to laver up that door, I guess. I don't think I got the means right now. In my inventory right now. There's no way. For all your little mahjong joke in chat, for all the despicable little mahjong freaks out there, mahjong sickos. Oh, I can just run here. Can I run now?
I'm not walking on the freeway. I shouldn't even be standing here.
Pet of a forest? We're going to farm at 9. Hey. I'm back. What? Where are you
I
going?
don't need the hernia. They're just full of party favors. And I'm not in the party mood.
I don't know what you're
Those
interacting
crates
with.
are completely blocking the sidewalk.
Why are you... It was the crates I was interacting with, but there was just no one near them. It's weird. I got the fire extinguisher now. Does that gonna help me? Oh, I know. Dude, that worker would be pretty damn upset, wouldn't he? If I just gussed up the works. If I just gummed up all the tubes up there with fire extinguisher foam, wouldn't he? He'd be pretty damn mad. Even just if I send a whole tube, right? It's tube shaped, right? What would be the best place to send it from, though? My place or Dom's place? Look, yeah, that's why Dom's office is open right now, right? Also, there's one tube that's very red. And there's a very red tube here.
Warning, fire system, do not touch. That's not on fire.
It's not on fire.
He's got a lock on it.
Oh, it's
Can't believe
locked.
He doesn't trust me. Not picking that up. No messages in Dom's fancy red tube.
How am I gonna unlock that? Unless I just don't mess with that. I just do it in my tube instead.
That's not on fire.
It's not on fire.
That's not on fire.
Oh, there goes my plan. I thought I was such a genius there. I think I do want to mess up the tube though. That's not good enough.
I don't got the lungs for it.
Can you combine two items? I don't think this isn't the type of game we can combine two items, right?
System, do not touch. That's
So I
not
can't
on
like
fire.
fill up my balloon with a fire extinguisher stuff, can I? The fuck is up with this? What is this?
That's not on fire.
There are certain lines in this game that really get burned into your everything, into your sensory organs, into all your executive functions. And for me, it was I don't want to mess up my blade. That's the one I remember. I can see that's not on fire, being well remembered as well. Draw.
Hey, get out of there, Calavera. Hey, get out of there, Calavera.
Manny, if you don't...
Right. I
Can
thought
I
you.
enter this office now?
Big Mr. Bossman doesn't want to be disturbed today. Big Mr. Bossman doesn't want to be disturbed today.
I guess I can go into his office again. Yeah, I guess we can just go into his office again. Because we didn't have the time to mess around with stuff before, right? I don't know if he's here now. I mean, he is here now. Maybe he's still not in the office. Now I have time to sneak around. I guess I go in there and check. It doesn't seem like my objective would be to go up the...
Hello?
Well, I'll try. Because it's not like I've gotten many more items to interact with up there. Like, I don't think I have anything to help me with the throwing of this rope here, right? Like, I want to throw this rope here, definitely, to get on this thing here. I guess, like, I would want some sort of grappling hook or something. Like, attachment to this. And I guess, like, you could see this thing here being that thing onto this rope here. But the thing
I
is,
don't wanna
he doesn't want to
mess
mess
up
with
my
his
blade.
blade. That's
My
not it.
scythe. I like to keep it next to where my heart used to be.
But is it on fire?
That's not on fire.
Okay, so you can't use that as
That's
like
not
your
on
grapple
fire.
hook thing. Because I want to do this. Can I walk around with it? No. Oh, I do get to access inventory though. Can I just... Whoa, that looks broken. Oh, that doesn't look right. That doesn't look right at all.
My scythe. I like to keep it next to where.
I don't care about where you keep your scythe, dude. Okay. So I can do this. And the only other item I can think of using, I'm having any success with right now, would be the fire extinguisher. But I'm pretty sure that's not it. But, you know, let's see what happens. You didn't even throw it!
That's not on fire.
Get rid of that.
No use for it. Not picking that up. The drapes are drawn. Dom must be in there now. No use for it. Not picking that up.
Can Alex sneak a peek at something?
Not while Domino's in there. Domino's in there. Not picking that up. Not picking that up. No way. If I go any farther, Dom will see me and call the staff shrink to come and talk me down.
Can I like knock on the windows of them? Hey T, hello. Welcome. I'm playing Grim Fandango. Maybe if I rub my balloon on this window.
No way.
It'll come out.
If I go any farther, Dom will see
Well, we
me
did
and call
rub
the staff
the
shrink to come
balloon
and
at
talk me
least.
down.
Is this gonna be a balloon-based puzzle?
It's locked.
Oh, it's locked. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I figured that we weren't gonna go up here immediately. This balloon here, it doesn't feel right. I feel like the other balloons is what I want. Oh god, I did not mean to do that. Yeah, I can't click on anything but this ladder here. Whee! No. I want to climb down though.
Not picking that up.
Not throw the rope. It's not time to just yet. Man, it's kicked up. Hello? Circus Clown. What news have you got for me?
My kid,
I'll take, a cat.
Okay. A cat.
No problem.
Let's just, like, exhaust all these balloon animals.
Ta-da! Some of my finest work.
Yep, more balloons. Hang on, I'm gonna have, like, an inventory full of balloons in a second here.
My kid.
Dingo?
Dingo?
That's
Whoa!
ta-da!
It's got teethies. Nice. Alright, how many balloons do I have? I really do just have an inventory full of balloons now. Oh my god. What? Why?
It's a squeaky little kitty. It's just a regular old balloon dog. I don't see what's so...
Oh, I get it. I know what to stuff in my pipes. It's the balloon animal. That's I can stuff in there.
My kid...
No, I can't. He just like...
What now?
He just rubbed it up against it.
Do you have any more dead worms back there?
More than worms, thank you. Wait, have I got more balloons now? No. I don't, right? Wait, do I? I think I do. I think, what? Yes, I've got 2 of them now. Yes, I wanted to save your game occasionally. Yes, yes, you're dead right, yes. Thank you.
Wants another balloon.
I do need to save my game very occasionally, yes. Not even very occasionally, like all the time, probably.
Can I have another? Did you lose? No.
Well, then just enjoy.
I haven't. No.
Well, then.
Bet you. Did you? No.
What? What?
That's not what balloons are for.
Okay.
My kid.
Okay, no more dead worms. No, no more dead worms.
Well,
How many dead worms can I get?
That's not what. I don't got the loan.
By dead worms, I mean just uninflated balloons.
My kid. Do you have?
well.
Okay, he just does it forever. I'm gonna mess up my inventory if I do this.
Since I really didn't get to celebrate the festival this year,
Oh, bread!
I think I'm entitled to a little pan de muertos.
Okay. Bread to that, shall take it.
I'll just take a little more bread to honor the dead.
Oh my god, how full is my inventory of just bread and balloons right now? don't suppose I can... I'll interact with the pipes. Actually, while I'm outside, yeah, let's climb up and see if I can do anything with the balloon and breads. I think what I
Very
need
good use of this special ceremonial
is to
bread.
get on a roof now. Potentially, right? That's the only thing up here I would need. Other than like distracting them, I guess. Via the windows, but I don't think that's... Now I think what actually the plan is to use this bread, this bread, this bread, this bread, this bread, this bread.
That wouldn't be a very good use of this special ceremonial bread.
See, it doesn't see the world the way I do.
I get crumbs all over.
Can I do this and then use the bread? See.
I get crumbs
Now
all
I got
over.
a bread lassie. Whoop, yeet. I don't know if that's
All over.
like intended. That I can pick out like
Not picking that up.
an item while I'm holding it. Maybe that's what intended. It always looks scuffed as hell when I do it. Maybe that's not how I solve the puzzle. Who's gonna give me a grapple hook then? Hello. I don't... Can I hold my bread? Just putting it into my long cube here.
That wouldn't be a very good
Nope,
use.
wouldn't be a good use of this special ceremonial bread.
What is that horrible squeaking noise you're making?
New shoes.
Oh my god, I'm a squeaky every now because I got balloons in my jacket. There we go.
Look out below.
Is that enough? Is that enough to gum up the works? Oh, there's crumbs everywhere. I'm so squeaky. How many breads just ruined this whole operation here? It's still working, so... More breads? Three breads has gotta be enough, right? It's working just fine still. Oh my god. Oh, I think that's all my breads. I only took 3. Meanwhile, I took all the balloons. Well, let's go down and see if that's enough, I guess. Can I stuff anything else in there?
It's a deflated balloon. That's not what balloons are for.
Okay. It's not what balloons are for. It is what breads are for, though. I mean, that's what he's saying. If you weren't gonna put the balloons in there, because that's not what balloons are for, but you are willing to put the breads in there, well, clearly breads are just made in your world, meant to be put in tubes then. So actually, maybe I'm not even doing like a whole crime right now.
Not picking that up.
How many breads have we eaten? Yeah. You should ask me how many breads I put down the tube, and I'll answer, how many breads have you eaten in your lives?
Can't reach.
Can't reach. Do I need more bread? This is very clearly a bread-based puzzle here.
I'll just take
How many breads do I need? Do I just keep stuffing bread down my pants? Or is there anything I need to do to my breads? Is like unadulterated bread not good enough for this puzzle, maybe, you know? It needs to be the special shit.
I've got some.
I got some, okay. Maybe that's how many breads I needed them to put in until he said, I got some. I had some mochi today. When I went to get some boba the other day, I also grabbed a big box of mochis though, and I got the cherry blossom box. I don't think the cherry blossom flavored, because I don't think cherry blossom is edible. But I guess maybe the mochi is like cherry flavored, but the filling was like the red bean stuff. It's very nice. And they're also tube shaped, which turns out is like actually a pleasant shape for mochi to be. Mochi, mo problems. I think I have less problems than my mochi have. Right now, I have a lot of mochi. Meanwhile, bread is clearly a big problem here. Or is it? It seems to be handling this bread totally fine. Totally fine. It's almost like I need a je ne sais quoi here. Something a little bit extra. Yeah, this isn't the solution. This is a step, but that step hasn't come yet. Maybe there's a reason why squeaking would be a good idea too. I guess I can go talk to Dom now that I'm squeaking alone. It's just the same cutscene every time. And it's not gonna change. Squeak, squeak. I guess the squeaking was a one-time thing.
Hey, her. Yeah. Well, you sound pretty. I think Don would call the company shrink if I left through the window. He's got a lock on it. I can't believe he doesn't trust me. Not picking that up. No messages in Dom's fancy red tube.
And I guess I can try. See if we can stuff it through the lock, you know?
He's got a lock on it. I can't believe he doesn't trust me. That's some premium-looking scotch.
Have some, Manny, just so you don't forget what premium tastes like.
Oh, what's that?
Look at all the diplomas.
You have to have the proper attitude to get diplomas like those, Manny.
Really? I thought you just had to have the proper postage. No use for it. I got plenty of my own.
No use for it. Ain't that the truth, brother? The balloons don't seem like they're particularly useful. Because I can't like actually interact with anything using the balloons, can I? You just does this. What if I cool him down so he has to clean himself up and get out of his office, right?
That's not on fire.
He's not on fire.
That's not on fire. That's not on fire.
Manny, if
Right.
No one wants to talk to me anymore.
Mr. Boss Man doesn't want to be disturbed today.
Can I message your tube? Nope. Was there a tube in the garage? The garage has not been very useful thus far. Almost makes me feel like I missed something specifically in the garage, right?
There are lies. The driver demons operate this somehow, and the company won't tell a salesman how it works. Ooh, I might get hurt if I try to get one down by myself. Ooh, I might get hurt if I try to get one down by myself.
Yeah, still gone.
It's locked.
Let's break the window.
When there's a door, not picking
But the
that
door is locked. Yes, that's what you need.
up. That's not on fire.
It's not on fire.
It's locked. Not picking that up. It's a tool cabinet.
Perfect for me right now. Well, I'm being such a tool. Oh. What the fuck is this?
Not picking that up. Who's afraid of a little rusty water?
Why is it making enough noise? Wait, can I fill up my balloons with rusty water?
That's not what balloons are for.
It's definitely what balloons are
Got the
for.
lungs for it.
And the rust is just extra damage in a water balloon fight. It's like dot damage. You do a little debuff on them. Ooh, what's that?
Can't go through on foot. People not picking that up.
Man has no improv skills. I know, right? It's just like, oh, it's not for that, and it
It's
just
locked.
doesn't do it. He has no imagination. Man, he just doesn't have a creative soul. For shame. Back in my office. Windows are no-go. Oh, can I do something about this now?
My message tube is full of nothing, as usual.
Okay, I haven't tried this, but does it matter if I close the tube after I put the bread in? I don't think it matters. God, there's so many crumbs in there, but it doesn't matter.
That's not what balloons are for.
Maybe my breads just need to be older, so like, you know, like staler, you know. So what if I just pick up a bread and we just like stand there for about like a few days, or not even a few days, just like our day with the bread in our hands. It'll be pretty stale, and then we try mashing it in there. So we just go get a bread here and just AFK for a while. Yeah, it'd never be a good writer because he has no curious mind. Exactly.
I just take a little more bread to honor. That wouldn't be a very good.
See, I don't.
I
get crumbs.
I'm a bit worried that the bread here is actually like
Just take a look.
a red herring for this puzzle.
I just take. I have to go. You.
A bread herring, yeah. Like I can't put it in chew, but it's a trick. They made a freaking pre-rendered cutscene though. For the bread hitting the fan.
That wouldn't be a very good use of this special ceremonial bread.
I'm actually not quite sure what my options are anymore, actually.
I'm not walking on the free. That wouldn't be a very good use of this special ceremonial bread. I shouldn't even be standing here.
I'm not even supposed to be standing
Very
here.
good use of this special
Oh,
ceremonial.
I'm gonna put my bread away so I can walk inside.
Not picking that up. Can't reach.
Wait, is this thing just like shooting breadcrumbs somewhere now? Is there like somewhere where my breadcrumbs have like wound up? I'm pretty sure that I need to get in here. That is my real puzzle right now.
You won't. There must be something else keeping it shut.
Something else keeping it shut. I think that's my puzzle. I need to get in this door. What is keeping it shut?
Not picking that up. The wheel won't turn. There must be something else keeping it shut. That wheel should open it.
This fucking imagery, dude. What were you thinking with this fucking imagery? God fucking damn it.
That's not on fire.
This room here must be important, right?
That's not on fire. That's not on fire. That's not on fire.
Like, why can I make this gel here?
That's not what balloons are for. That's not what balloons are for.
I got it. So uncreative.
It's a nasty chemical puddle. No thanks. That stuff smells terrible, man. I'm not getting that stuff all over my hands.
How about the bread? Would you like to get it all of your bread?
That wouldn't be a very good use of this special ceremonial bread. That would... I get crumbs all over. I get crumbs all over.
No, crumbs is what you need.
It's a lump of our packing foam.
Nah, would you like to use your bread with it?
That wouldn't be a very good use of this special ceremonial bread.
Nope. Can I keep pouring, actually? No, you just... Yeah, you can only do one foam at a time. Maybe this is another red herring here, then. Like, what is this foam about? Very strange. There we go. There we go. Okay, that I was wondering. Okay, yeah.
No thanks. That stuff smells terrible, man.
That's how we go with the work supply. And then we need one balloon with this other stuff here. Yeah, you just put it on the table just to like show you what it does. And the bread is a total red herring, I guess. Or it's kind of a clue, I guess, to show you can stuff in there, but it made me kind of think like, oh, I just need to put in a few more breads then to like really, really convince this thing, you know? Really put the fear of God in this thing. There he goes. Not bad. Then put in the other one. And hopefully this is gonna make a huge mess down there. Oh, we got the wacky music. That sounds like a huge mess.
That doesn't sound good.
Ooh, is that a fire? I know what to do about a fire.
Server's down again.
What else is new?
I wonder why the servers could be down. Now perhaps I can get in there. Yes, I can.
Hi, I'm not getting any messages. Is the server down?
This is their idea of a joke? They think it's funny? I'd like to jam their tubes with packing material. See how they like that?
Can I squeeze in there just for a sec?
Can I squeeze in there just for a sec?
Are you kidding? This is a highly secured area. No one's allowed in here who ain't me.
What's so special about you?
So special about you?
I, sir, am an elemental spirit, summoned from the land of the
Okay.
dead itself.
Maybe that's pretty
Yeah,
special.
let me
sure.
guess. You were given one purpose, one skill, one desire. Fixing pneumatic tube switchers.
No, I was created to run the elevators, but they put in those dang motion detectors and put me out of work.
That's a rough life.
Who would do a terrible thing like this?
It's those punks in the mailroom. They think this baby is going to put them out of a job. And they're right.
Just curious. How'd you get in there?
I squeezed down one of these tubes like a pixie. How do you think I got in here? Through the door, just like you.
So you're saying the server is down?
I want you
is
to be
that
a
it?
little bit more
Server
specific.
is not down. It's never down. It's just temporarily unavailable while I'm doing some maintenance, that's all.
So how long is it gonna be down?
With a job like this, you can never tell. Probably hours.
Or until no one's around to see you sneak out, eh?
Whichever comes first.
You know, I really think it's clean enough.
Oh, it's clean enough to run, all right. I'm just fiddling around to be safe. You know, gotta cover my ass.
Yes, you do.
Say,
It is really caked up.
got a lot of tubes to flush here.
Hey, me too. I'll let you go.
Oh, not again.
Oh, he's on fire.
You trying to blow this joint sky high? That's a magnesium compound fire extinguisher. Spray that on this packing foam, and we'll both be riding the giant Roman candle out of here.
What? Why would they put something so dangerous in here?
I guess they didn't expect this room to be full of hazardous waste.
Well, that's a clue.
Hey. Cheerful communications.
Okay, so maybe I
on the job.
send down the jelly stuff, and then now I can send down the fire extinguisher, and it blows up. I was thinking about sending out the fire extinguisher the whole time. And you just didn't get the idea. You just didn't know it was like there were gonna be solutions. You just didn't want to do it. Hey, you want bread?
That wouldn't be a very good use of this
What do you
special
mean you can go on a
ceremony
break and I can
bread.
go in here?
That wouldn't be a very good use of this special ceremonial bread. The wheel won't budge. Not picking that up.
Maybe I should lock him in there.
Can't reach. That red tube looks familiar.
Sure does, eh? I need a red tube. Do I have anything to interact with this? Do we just play some cards? Or who gets the right to be inside his room?
Just wouldn't help there.
You're just not creative, dude. You can. I just told you how.
I couldn't play this card there.
Alright, what if I just use the fire extinguisher anyway, dude? Who cares about this
That's
warning?
not on fire.
It's not on fire.
That's not on fire.
Ooh.
Good enough for government work.
Good enough for government work. He's a gorilla guy. I don't know how that helps me. But he put like a
Can't reach.
thing in the red tube there,
I
right?
think that's the other end of Domino's message tube. If I could just get in there. Oh, there must be something not picking that up.
Yeah, so I just gotta like do the whole thing again. And I already got all the balloons in my bag, so I guess I may as well. I could also revert to say, but I feel like we did make. I wonder if like Manny, the character, learns information though, so I can do something that I previously couldn't, you know. I think we made some progress, like even though it felt like I didn't solve anything. Shit, I hope I got one red and one blue though. I kind of forgot which one I put in the previous balloon because I was scrolling through. There's so many fucking items.
Manny, if you don't.
Right. I do what you.
But he puts in like a blocker thing though. In the red tubes. I guess that might be important. Oh, I should save here. Cool. So what if I then now use this fire extinguisher?
Warning. Fire system. Do not touch. That's not on fire.
Wait, is this a fire system as in it's meant for making fire?
Hey,
Kinda
Hurl.
sounds like it.
Yeah. Well, all.
I wonder if I can use it for something if I think about it like that.
No messages in Dom's fancy red. Not picking that up. I think Dom would call the company shrink if I left through the window.
I don't think there's anything about this drink, is there? Unless I can like carry some of the drink with a balloon. Gotta wet my bread. Maybe I could do like a really scuffed like
Balloons are for.
Catholic ritual with my bread and the scotch. Maybe that'll help me. No, Dom doesn't seem particularly perturbed about the whole servers being down thing and there's no
Servers down
tubes
again.
going
What else is
through.
new?
Manny,
Right. I te watch you.
big Mr. Boss Man doesn't want to be disturbed today.
Right. I'm gonna say right here. This must be something I'm missing. And if I don't figure it now, I'd like to just revert to save again, so I don't have to
Still
do
not
that whole
getting
thing
any
again.
messages. Ah, cheerful communications maintenance staff not picking that up.
Break time, Habibi? I could go for a little break, couldn't I?
Can't reach.
Maybe we should go for a little break while we look at this absolutely kinked up guy. I could go for a little drink. You know what? Yeah, Habibi, let's go for a little break. Yeah. And a little posture check and everything. Hydra check. Hydra homies. All of the above. Break time. Be right back. See you in like 5. Enjoy the view. Be right back. Oh, am I muted? Or not muted? I don't know. I don't think I'm muted. My stream deck isn't working. I was gonna clock check, but I'm pretty sure that means it's not working. Now it's working. Hello, I'm back. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Clappy. Yeah, I fully intended for that clap not to go through on my mic, but I guess my the Stream Deck mute button just doesn't do anything. Right? Hello, I'm muted. Hello, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, it does nothing. It literally does nothing right now. That's weird. I'll have a look at that after the stream, I guess. So the moment I leave this room...
Hey, I'm still not getting any messages.
he just leaves, taking all the stuff I need with him. The only clue I've got is... I mean, hang on, what if I do the bread? Maybe I need to put in the bread after I put in the stuff. Like, what happens if I put in the bread now? Because I can do the bread as well. Maybe the bread isn't the red herring after all. No bread herring time.
There's no air pressure. Server must be down.
No. Yes, I can't do the bread. Breading. Bread herring. And he doesn't want to stuff anything in there either. So I can't have like something kind of loaded up.
That's not on fire.
And it's not on fire. I didn't show the balloons to him. I guess I could do that.
Oh, that's what's making that terrible noise.
Yeah, it's my balloons. There you go. You don't like the balloons?
Oh, that's what's making that terrible noise.
How about this balloon?
Oh, that's what's making that terrible noise.
Nope. She's equally upset about all the balloons.
Mind if I use your hole punch?
Knock yourself out.
Thanks.
Gets the aggressions out, doesn't it?
What the fuck is up with this
car's full of
card?
holes.
There's gotta be like some sort of there's gotta be something that wants like the pattern from the hole punch or something like that,
I
right?
couldn't play this card there.
Unless he did just put in a bunch of holes randomly in this.
I couldn't play this card there.
Like, why would I need a card with a bunch of holes in it? Like, my first item being the deck of cards feels so weird. Because it seems so useless.
This deck of cards is a little frayed around the edges. Then again, so am I. And I've got fewer suits.
Thanks, but I got solitaire on the computer, Manny.
Yeah, but this one has one less card than it's supposed to. That's nice. That demon doesn't even, like, leave anywhere important. So it's not even like I can, go where the demon came from or something like that. I actually have one more balloon to use. Oh no, that was my last one, wasn't it? Ah, damn it. Well, I guess it's enough to just check if we can put in another foam thing while he's inside. But I'm pretty sure the there's no pressure thing. Like, applies to any item I would try to put in there. There's simply no items that are allowed to put in the tube right now while it's down there. Not even the fire extinguisher tube.
There's no air pressure.
Yeah.
Server must be down.
I don't think this puzzle a bit, really? Boop, 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 boop.
I should close. Not portable.
Yeah, I feel like I'm most of the way there. And I'm stumped on something, and I'm not sure what the problem is.
He's got a lock on it. I can't believe he doesn't trust me. Not picking that up. Hey, get away from my... Not portable.
And none of the people here want to speak with me.
Big Mr. Boss Man doesn't want to be disturbed today.
No one wants to speak with me, so... I do just have to do something down here.
Hey, I'm still not getting any message. I'm not picking that up. The wheel won't... It's the wheel on the door. I've just locked an open door. Strange, yet symbolically compelling.
Got it.
Good enough for government work.
I did look at that thing there, and I did feel like it was important. It stuck out a little bit that there was a lock on it, yeah. But I didn't quite see it on the other side of the door. There we go, we're in. Thank you, thank you.
It's locked. Not picking that up. That red tube looks familiar.
There's one problem after the other, eh? Oh, I see.
Mercedes Colomar, client number 930.
Oh my god.
Chickenpox, time of death, yada yada yada. Aha, positive attributes. Volunteer time.
I think I know what the holes are for now. It's for the air, isn't it?
That's really good. I think you're it, Mercedes Colomar. I think you're the one for me.
Yeah, the door lock is pretty subtle, yeah. It's kind of hard to see.
Got into you. That was a company car.
Oh yeah, and it's even better company now.
Ooh.
I'm in.
It's got fire for auto speeds. Oh, it's literally on fire, yeah. Speak of on fire, what's the deal with the fire extinguisher? Or the balloon animals?
Buenos dias.
You're not the nurse?
No?
You're not here to give me my medication?
No, but I am here to ease your pain.
Guess they couldn't save me, huh?
No. But there's still a chance you could save me.
That's a lot of responsibility, Mr.
Got a
Calavera.
client.
What makes you think I've been all that good?
Miss Colomar.
Meche, please.
Meche. I can see it in your face and in your file here, where it says you're entitled to a first-class ticket to... nowhere? What?
Did I do something wrong?
Not according to your bio. It was spotless. At least the part I read was.
I'm not sure I like the implication, Mr. Calavera.
The only implication here is that I'm fired.
Is it something I did?
Are you sure you're Mercedes Colomar?
Yes. Would you like to see my birthmark?
I don't think I can.
Sure. Where is it?
It's wherever you guys put my skin.
Yeah. You have a nice bone tattoo over there, though. What's that about? I don't think I've ever seen anyone else have a squiggle like that.
Anything about your past you haven't told me?
Quite a bit, considering I've told you nothing.
Mean to animals?
Oh no, I love
Oh
animals.
no.
Once, when I was volunteering at an animal shelter,
Just stop right there. Were you a big shoplifter?
well, they accused me of it once.
Really?
But it wasn't my fault. That puppy followed me out of the store.
Oh. Ever cheated on your taxes?
I've never paid taxes in my life.
Aha.
I've never made enough money to be taxed. You know, it's mostly been all volunteer work.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Ever cheated on your husband?
Mr.
But it's some
Calavera,
cheating,
there's
yeah.
no ring on my finger.
There's no skin on it either.
I guess you'll just have to trust me then.
Litter?
Oh, Manny, is that the best you can do?
Did you kill much when you were alive?
Very little.
Me too. She's so relatable.
Never killed anybody?
I have to confess, I never killed anybody.
Not even a teensy bit of killing?
Maybe I just wasn't trying hard enough.
Relatable. Telling you.
Work with me, Meche. Give me some dirt.
Well, I could do something bad right now if that would help.
Wouldn't
Like say a
count.
bad word.
Sorry, I give up.
Don't say that, Manny.
Excuse me, but I have to go straighten this mess out.
Sorry to be so much trouble, Mr. Calavera.
It's no trouble, but please, call me Manny.
Achievement. I'm getting achievement for every new NPC I talk to, I guess. Well, I don't want to speak to any bosses about this. I guess Ava?
I'm sorry I let you down, Manny.
Oh. Not your problem. You've been rigged. Someone's messing around with your files.
In my office.
No, I'm not gonna time.
Vandalized company property in order to obtain secret information so you could take your illegally modified company
Yeah.
car and your unregistered driver and run domino
All of
here
this is
on the
true,
road.
yeah.
All in order to steal a client from her legitimate agent.
There's nothing legitimate about this place. You give all the good clients to Domino.
Manny, now I'm embarrassed for you.
You've embarrassed the whole office. I'm going to call the woman in here so you can apologize to her yourself. Ava, send in Ms. Colomar, please.
She left about 15 minutes ago, sir. She said she had a long walk ahead of her and she wanted to get started.
Walking? She had a ticket on the number 9. Why does she think she has to walk?
That's the best package I could find for her.
Now you see why I give all the good clients to Domino.
Oh, he has something on his hand. It's
That woman
like
was
an
a
O or
saint and a
something.
shoo-in for a double-end ticket that she's not going to get because you just couldn't find it. And now, because of your little stunt, she's out there, on her own, walking by herself through the petrified forest, facing the demons of the underworld, alone and unprotected. This is her reward after a lifetime of hardship and public service? Her destiny stolen by some overreaching salesman looking for a fat commission he didn't deserve! Get in there and stay put until the boys downtown tell
no.
us what they
Oh,
want
I found a way in here at
Someone's
least.
gonna take the fall for
Something.
this Calavera, and it ain't gonna be me!
Oh no, man. It smells like a big old fat conspiracy to me. It's like they're hoarding all the tickets or something. Nope. Oh,
Ooh, ick. It came
every
out like
good
soft-serve
prison
coffee.
escape puzzle
Judging
starts with some
by the
ketchup.
smell, I think it's auto body filler. That's not on fire.
Maybe just leave.
Hey, is anybody out there?
Oh, there's someone's out there.
So, Manuel, have you thought about what you have done? I'm thinking about getting out and getting even. That's it.
The only way out, Manuel, is to be taken back in. If you are truly still loyal to this company, declare it loudly. The management might hear and stick you right back in their fold.
The DOD runs a crooked game, and I intend to prove it.
You would do that? That could cause this agency a lot of trouble.
I'm gonna blow the lid off this place.
Young man, you are an enemy of the Department of Death. Welcome to the club. Salvador
He did
Limones
look
and guests.
like not a guard here.
LSA.
LSA?
I saw the beret on him.
Souls Alliance. We're a small
That's the
group.
international symbol of freedom
We're always
fighter.
looking for new soldiers.
Sometimes, not always.
Help in our intelligence unit. You know Eva, of course.
Man.
Oh,
I was once a reaper like yourself, Manuel.
he was here as well, of course.
But I uncovered a web of corruption
Apparently.
in the beloved Department of Death. I have reason to believe that the Bureau of Acquisitions is cheating the very souls it was chartered to serve. I think someone is robbing these poor, naive souls of their rightful destinies, leaving them no option but to march on a treacherous trail of tears, unprotected and alone, like babies, Manuel, like babies. What's your evidence? That's where you come in, Manuel. Or should I call you Agent Calavera? Manny suits me fine. I'm not looking to join any military organization, Sal. I just want my job back so I can work off my time and get out of this dump. Well, you won't even be able to get out of this city without my help. Which means, of course, you won't be able to find that woman and you'll never get your job back. When you're ready to join the cause, Manuel, come talk to me. We might be of some use to each other.
No, I'm here right now. I'll take the services right now. I've got my fire extinguisher ready to go, buddy. It's on fire, is it?
That's not on fire.
Rain?
It won't budge. It opens for members of the LSA only. Where does this go? To a secret tunnel out of the city. But it opens for members of the LSA only.
Well, I'll become a member of them.
Okay, I'm in. What do I have to do? I'm going to build an underground army of souls to fight the injustice I have seen in El Marro. Communication will become vital as the Lost Souls Alliance spreads out. We'll need messengers we can trust. You want me to be your messenger? No, Manuel. Our numbers are small and our agents are too valuable to risk that sort of work. History shows only one messenger to be of use to a cause like ours. Carrier pigeons.
I've seen a lot of pigeons around.
If I grab some pigeons off the roof, will you let me go? No, I need to raise them from birth, Agent Calavera. I need you to bring me their eggs.
Eggy.
You're keeping me here because you need the eggs? Why are you still here, Calavera? Go get me an Air Force before it hatches. Do you know something I don't know? Have you ever wondered why your clients, even your best clients, never seem to qualify for the packages you know they deserve? Yes. My last client in particular, Mechi. Well, they all did qualify, Manuel. Especially her. But somehow, somebody with access to the files has stolen their just rewards. Their sweet hereafters. Their tickets on the number 9? Precisamente, amigo. What would they do with the tickets? A ticket on the number 9 is like a leaf of gold, Manuel. Especially to one who has died with a less than perfect record.
Someone's brought me the
Someone
way
is
in.
profiting here from those that would buy their way into heaven.
What currency are they using? Yeah.
But money's not important here. We all just want out. You want to get out, Manuel. And so do I someday. But for some people, this world is all there is. They have decided to seek pleasure and happiness here in the 8th underworld. And for that, you need money.
Okay, sure.
Now that's all the briefing you need, soldier. Viva la revolución!
Indeed. Hey, Eva, so you've just been here the whole time?
You're not really a secretary.
I'm a spy, Manny.
Well, that's the last time we used that temp agency.
Yeah.
Any messages for me?
Yes. Join or die.
But I'm already...
Again.
Eva, you gotta get me out of town. They're gonna sprout me.
You can't leave, Manny. We need access to the DoD computer network if we're ever gonna find out what's going on. And we can't access without a salesman like you. The computer IDs you when you log on.
How does it do that? Fingerprints? I don't have any.
Your teeth, Manny. Haven't you ever noticed your computer scanning your teeth when you log on?
I thought that was just a power search.
We need your teeth, Manny. We can't let you go. Sorry.
How long have you been a spy?
The whole time?
Salvador recruited me about a year ago.
okay.
I couldn't resist him. He's just so noble.
Doesn't Cabal wonder where you are?
Don and Domino were both locked up in Don's office with some bigwig from downtown. Some fatty in a fez.
Who is the fat man, I wonder? And how does he fit into this sinister puzzle?
I was wondering that too, Sal. Thank you for interjecting.
What are you working on there?
I'm trying to get this radio working so we can use it in the field, but it looks pretty hopeless. Salvador's right. We need good old-fashioned homing pigeons to communicate with our field agents.
You have field agents?
No, it's just Sal and me right now. But someday, Manny.
So, you won't help me out of here.
Sorry. I'll help you out, but not your teeth. Think it over.
Join or die again. Not a Chivo. I've got the same Chivo for the same person. Chivo galore. Oh, now it's open to get back into the garage. I guess then, right? Yeah, so I can get in here easily. Oh, but I think I can get into my office still, right? Because they're like cooped up in the in someone's office now. So no one's guarding in the hallway, so I can probably still walk around here. How do I get in there again? Yeah. I wonder.
I'm not going upstairs.
Oh, no,
I think I'm still locked in the shop.
Perhaps I can get through like a window up there now. Yeah, because there's two windows. There's two windows. In any case, I need to go up here and to check out the pigeons. I didn't get anything though. Doesn't help me with this ladder here. Did I? I got no new items here. I just got bread. Which is eventually going to be useful with pigeons, I'm sure. But not for getting up on the roof.
Dom's office is empty. Aha. There's nobody in Domino's office. Not picking that up.
There we go. Now I can look around his office. Uninterrupted. What you got in this drawer here, buddy? What were you hiding?
There's something glowing in there. It looks like a glowing hunk of coral. I can't even imagine a way to use coral there.
What?
He's got a lock on it. I can't believe he doesn't
Oh.
trust me.
That's my grappling hook, of course.
I can't even imagine a way to use coral there. I'm gonna try to
I think
guess
that's
his
all I need.
password.
Big poopy butthole.
Nope. It's not Golden Boy.
But it could have been.
I can't go strolling through the halls now. I'm on the lam.
On the lamb? What else is that? Does anyone say that? No, did anyone say that in the history of Dota? Right, so pick up this. Then withdraw the coral, right? And then does it make the little swing every time? It sure does. It's so shiny.
Domino, on your new job, Hector.
Smells like nepotism to me. What? Oh, I guess this should work? No. Oh, there we go. It does work. Excellent. Excellent, excellent. Thank you. I thought my way
That's
seemed
how
more,
Domino meant it to be used.
you know, more convenient, but this'll do this'll. Excellent. This seems very dangerous, but help yourself. Who even installed this? I guess maybe maybe Sal or something installed this. Unless like the boss had it installed, so he could like see. So we can secretly leave the office, isn't he? Because he's like leaving like auto answer machines and stuff. He's like sneaking out like Mike Dawson in Darkseid or something. God, Mike Dawson, that's a name I haven't thought of in a while. Hey pigeons, mind if I take the eggie?
Hey!
No, they don't like me.
Shoot! I don't have a or a desire to have a pet
I
pigeon?
think I actually know the solution to this puzzle. So we heard the balloon go off and a bunch of birds flying away, right? So
It's a squeaky little kitty.
hidden.
This doesn't look anything like Robert Frost.
Robert Frost, you're gonna bowl.
Maybe that will scare them. Eventually.
And maybe now we sprinkle on some bread, right, to bait them in here. And I guess we just look at them. Yeah, there we go. Let us go there for it. Right, excellent. That's such a dumb puzzle. Why wouldn't you just pop the balloon in the first place? Just pop it yourself.
Yeah, beat it, you lousy little ledge pickers.
Just pop the balloon to thingy. Why? That's so dumb.
You must come with me, young ones, for I am the Grim Reaper. Man, are those pigeons gonna be ticked. Man, are those pigeons gonna be ticked. Man, are those pigeons gonna be ticked. Man, are
I
those
don't need
pigeons
one egg.
gonna be
That's
ticked.
we could do just one egg. And I guess that's my ticket out of El Maro already. Excellent. Love to see it. Well, assuming I'm gonna be able to just leave the tunnel and be out of there already after delivering this egg. Hello?
Agent Calavera and 2 guests.
Oh, we did take 2 eggs. Okay. I don't see why it would be my job to get the eggs. I thought my job was to get information from you know, my company, but sure, I'll be egg retriever as well.
Check these babies out.
Excellent, Manuel. With these, I can breed an entire army of winged messengers. Our revolution can spread now across the land, carried on the shimmering wings of justice, thanks to you, Agent Calavera.
I myself would also like to spread across the land.
But you can't. We need your dental work here to access the computer. I am sorry, but freedom has its price.
My teeth? Hmm. Could always like just bite into the
Look,
you know,
got
the
egg you wanted.
thingy.
Now can I go?
Yeah,
Sorry, but your teeth. The revolution depends on your teeth. Viva la revolución!
you know the thing I used to like gum up the works in the you know, the server, the tube machine, the gel there. I could always just bite into the gel and you can get the mold with my teeth, you know?
Why won't you?
I need your teeth.
Manuel, I was looking at that.
I think Salvador will get upset. It's a slide projector.
Manuel, I was looking at that.
It won't budge.
It opens for members of the LSA only.
You called me agent.
I get crumbs all over.
Yeah, but you could bite it and then it gets your teeth print.
That's not on fire.
Yeah, no. Oh, what's that? What's that?
That's not on fire.
Oh, it's not on fire. That's what it is. No, what is
This
this?
computer shut.
We
Turn
salvaged
it on.
that unit when the company threw it away, but we have yet to get it working. When we do, we'll need you to get us into the system.
I'll be long gone before then.
We'll see, Manuel.
Not portable. This computer shut off. This computer shut off. Why won't you help me out?
I need.
It's my boss's secretary's evil twin. I'd put on a hand shadow show, but the mood just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, not quite the
Not
time.
picking that up.
At least you can read the room, Manny.
I think Salvador would get
Would
upset.
prefer if you could actually regular read it. Something's happening. Something's not happening. Never mind. Well, I need to solve my teeth problem elsewhere. Can I do it in here?
I'm not going. They still think I'm locked up. Hopefully.
Maybe the clown can make my teeth as balloons.
My kid. Do you have any...
Look, if I give you any more of so...
Looks like some sort of crafty mind. I have you. They're just full of party face. I don't need the hernia.
Don't need the hernia. Where are you going, Manny? What the fuck? Where'd you go here? It's just, the pathing is very strange
I'm not
sometimes.
walking on the freeway. I shouldn't even be standing here.
Oh, teeth. It's gonna be... Oh my god! Teeth on the balloon. I don't know, maybe? Check it out, guys. I got some dentals here. It's on the balloon, but what's the difference?
Agent got...
I mean, what else can I even interact with? The only other place I can go right now is the garage. Oh my god. Yes, there's a goop in there. There's goop in the garage. I don't know how I'm supposed to interact with the goop, but they have goop in here. And I guess now that I know that I need it for my teeth print, maybe it's gonna look at it a bit differently.
Hey, what did they do with Glottis? Ooh, ick. It came out like soft serve ice cream, but judging by the smell, I think it's auto body filler.
Okay, so I need the mold of my teeth first, and then I'll put that in there. Maybe?
It's locked. Not picking that up.
I'm not sure what I can bite into though. That's the thing. Can I bite into this?
That's not on fire.
No, it's not fine.
It stays here. It looks like it dispenses something called Dent.
Dent. It's for my teeth. It's definitely for my teeth. But I need
Ooh, ick. It came
I need
out
a
like
mold
soft
for
serve
it.
Ice cream, but judging by the smell, I think it's auto body filler.
What's gonna be the mold?
That wouldn't be a very good use of this special ceremonial bread.
Okay, I'll return here. Once I find something to bite into. But what though? The only thing I can think of is the mass we got from like squeezing those things together. The blue tube and the red tube into the dough there. You can bite into that, but I can't go back in there now. So that's not it. It's not a bread.
The driver
Oh,
deals
I don't know.
somehow.
It doesn't seem to be the
Company
bread.
won't tell a salesman how it works.
I tried interacting with it. It didn't seem to do much. I'm allowed to live in that sense.
Can't go through on foot, not picking that up. Through there lies the Limbo Highway, and on the other side of that, the land of the living. People have tried, but they never came back.
And I can't go up.
I want them to think I'm still
Yes,
locked
I
in
can't go through the front door, and I also can't go through the lift. Which leads me to believe maybe I need to look for something. Oh my god, Dom's teeth guards, right? That he's got like a mouth guard. What is it called? He might have left that behind. The blue shit. He punched on while he was slapping the thing. That must be it. There it is. I see it. No, it's right there. Manny, pick it up. Excellent. Yum, 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 yum. It's not my teeth though.
Domino had this in his mouth.
But I guess that'll do. I mean, Dom's teeth is probably way better than my teeth, right? Oh, is that going to be the password as well? I can actually access this single computer. But I guess maybe that's not important for me, but it's more important for them. We'll see what happens. So, go in here. And then we just slap the guard on the in the machine. Goop it up. Yes, 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 yes. Good.
Fill a dent. Good for dents, great for dentures.
Very good for dents. Love these. Yum, yum, yum.
Got something here that might interest you.
It's time.
I'm not sure what to make of that. Why don't you show it to my intelligence officer?
Ooh, what is that? Custard?
Try it.
No thanks. I'm watching my figure.
What?
Ooh, what is...
Try it.
No thanks. I'm watching my...
Oh, I have to bite into it first. Okay.
Wow, that made a perfect impression of my teeth and left quite a chalky aftertaste too.
No, I guess it's the same item.
Manny, this looks like a perfect impression of your teeth. We can use this as a mold to make a fake set of teeth and get into the computer system that way.
Good work, soldier. You are a friend of the revolution, Agent Calavera. And now, let me be of service.
Well, you better like keep brushing your teeth well, otherwise you're gonna be unemployed, right?
Find your lost soul.
You can't access your fucking computer.
I don't. But everyone who wants to get to the ninth underworld must cross the Sea of Lament. And therefore
Seems like a
must
poor
go
way
to
to have a
Okinawa get
password
passage
system.
on a ship. As long as you get there before she does, you'll find her. But it may be quite a wait.
I'll wait as long as it takes.
Rubicava.
Manuel,
It's like
are
the
you
Rubicon.
in love with her?
Love? Love is for the living, Sal. I'm only after her for one reason. She's my ticket out of here.
Oh. There we go.
That was some tunnel. I'm all the way to the edge of the petrified forest.
Giuseppe! What the fuck is your name, dude?
My friend, why are you crying?
Manny? Oh, Manny! They fired me! What?
Me too, buddy.
You don't understand, Manny. I was created just to do that job. It's the only thing that makes me happy. It's like they reached into my chest and pulled out my heart and threw it into the woods to...
Oh, that might have been a bad idea.
Glottis.
Glottis, that's your name.
Oh, Glottis.
Really shouldn't have done that, Glottis. I'm not a heart surgeon. Oh no, those guys really want your heart, Glottis. I'm gonna go save it, I guess.
Oh no. Ooh, ick. Shoot!
I don't think I have the means of fending off bugs. Do I? I have a scythe, but he doesn't want to mess up his blade. Oh, they're not that big. I'll take that.
It's stuck in there good.
It is, isn't it? And let me... Oh, new jacket. Let me guess. You don't want to mess up your blade, do you? No, he'll use it.
Piece of cake.
Oh, that one's a bit bigger. It's a cazador. It's gonna poison me, dude.
Don't think that's gonna work.
Okay, so if I try repairing it, they just come in and fix it again. They took out all my bread away from me and all my balloons. What the fuck were the balloons? Oh, I needed one balloon for the pigeons.
That's not on fire. That's not on fire. That's not on fire. I guess I could always use a spare.
Bones?
I'll just drop this one. I'm carrying...
Fuck.
Soup's on. Huh. They don't seem very interested in that bone I put in there. There's already a bone in there.
Okay. Maybe if I put enough bones there, I have like a bit of a marimba, and I can do a little jig for them, which will make them happy.
Oh, poor spiders. No more demon heart to eat.
Wait, what? Why did a bone help there? I don't get it. I'm confused. But I'll take it. I guess the bone fortified the web so that I could instead... I don't know. I'm so confused. I'm so confused why that worked.
It's still beating.
Just put it in there. Just put it in there. Jam it in. Smush. Right into heart cavity.
Heart is good. Be good to heart. Don't tear out heart. Heart is good. Strong, beating, good heart. Hey, is that my car?
Our car? Oh, that's it? Okay.
Mr. Lamont, I assure
Figured it
you
would be
the
more to that
missing
zone.
woman will be found. I will personally track her down myself.
Just like you personally picked her up from the land of the living.
That was my intention.
Oh,
But
that's
Agent
the guy.
Calavera somehow got to her first.
The big boss.
We gave you the fastest car, Domino. We gave you all the best clients. You had all the advantages. So how was this Calavera able to sneak in there and eat your lunch? Oh, now, Hector, you can't get too mad at
that's
Domino. That wasn't his fault. Oh, I can.
Oh, Hector's the one that gave him that prize as well,
I
the
can
Thatchy.
get too mad, but not at Domino. After all, he wasn't in charge of this operation. At least, not until now.
Bang!
Hector, no! Oh, marigolds. Funny.
He got sprouted.
For some reason, I was expecting tulips. Well, maybe Mr. Calavera, eh?
Why are you
Domino?
expecting tulip?
Why don't you personally go down to the
Well, I
basement
don't
and
know.
escort
I don't get
him
the
up
joke.
here? sooner he's sprouted and we can get back to business, the better.
Wanna go for a ride?
I thought you'd never ask!
Let's get out of here. I really want to play Pilots 9 now. I'm very nostalgic about that game. Maybe after I stream Final Fantasy 10, which might be when I come back from home from Finland, which would be around winter. It's gonna be a little minute. Okay, yeah, I'm up here now.
Hey, wait a second.
What if I go in here? I'm here now. Okay. Well, what if we go in there? Okay, I'm here now. Okay, so what if we go in here? I don't know how I'll know I'm doing the right thing here. What? Okay. How about this one? Okay, this I've already gone through that. What about this one? Oh, that's weird. It just sends you back out to the same one? No? What? Oh, maybe I went in that and then I came in that. Oh, yes, I went in that and then I came in that, okay. Well, that's every single hole. Oh boy, this puzzle. Yeah. There's nothing tricky. Can I go anywhere else here? I can go here. I can also exit the car.
Manny, this is a low-riding street rod, not a 4x4. We don't have the clearance for that kind of road.
What's up here? This is where the spiders were, right? Oh, I'm blocking the fucking road, aren't I?
Okay, I don't know what those weird noises are, but I think I'd rather go find out in the safety of the bone wagon.
Oh my god, can you stop walking everywhere? You're so slow and the pathing is so terrible. Oh my god, you're so slow, man. Okay. What? Okay. I think I actually blocked my way into this whole area here when I parked there. I didn't want to go. That's something different.
Híjole, mano. What sort of unholy Christmas tree farm is this, Gladys? Gladys?
Manny, check out this wheelbarrow, will ya? With a couple of ATV nubby tires on the back and a 2-stroke lawnmower engine, we could make one sweet go-kart.
Sure, go-kart, that's exactly what I need right now.
Ooh, careful, Manny! With the harmonic balancer turned off, those pumps might shake that tree apart. Oh, but... Oh! If we shook the tree down, those pumps would dislodge, and I could make high-lift shocks out of them for the bone wagon. Hold on.
That's
I'm
great.
going to unbalance that wheel with some of these weights. That'll shake her down for sure.
I like where head's at. It's just solving the puzzle for me. This is fantastic. Thank you, Gladys.
Okay, just give me a second to balance these doggies. Hey, Manny! What are you doing?
Outside of the entertainment value, that didn't do what I had hoped.
Right, it seems like it depends where I put this wheelbarrow, right? What happens, I guess? Whee! I'm sorry, Gladys. I just had to know what would happen, you know?
A dirty trick, Manny.
Oh, it was an accident. I bumped the switch with my elbow.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Hey, while you have that off, let me try moving those weights around some more. Now, no monkey business this time, Calavera.
Is he actually doing anything up there? Or maybe I just need to move this one around first before I probably switch again.
That should do it.
Oh, what?
Still not enough.
And maybe if I move them around a little.
Oh, I see. Ba-dum. Dum, ba-dum. Dum, boom, boom. I don't know what I'm trying to achieve it though. Maybe all of them going off at once? Fuck me, this is really annoying. Oh, I just can't put it specifically where I want it. I don't know. Is that it?
Hey, while you have that off, let me try moving those weights around some more.
It's not exactly like a manual that comes with this thing or anything that shows
Now, no
when it would be,
this
it would be a
time,
good time to do anything, you know?
Manny, you promise!
Yeah, I don't understand this puzzle.
That was a dirty trick, Manny.
Wasn't me this time. These kids did it.
Oh, okay.
Like, I don't know if either solution is actually to fling him around like that.
Hey,
The solution might just be to just wait for him to try up there and do something. But it's definitely to do with those how I time those
monkey
things.
business this time, Calavera.
And I don't know if it's like all of them at once or some sort of sequence.
That should do it.
still not enough.
And maybe if I moved them around a little.
Yeah, I think the solution is to make him spin around up there.
Hey, while you have that
And
off,
then
let me
like
try moving those
have
weights
some sort
around
of
some
order on
more.
these things here. But this is like extreme moon logic. There's no like hints or indicators around for like
Now, no monkey business this time,
there's no indicators for what's all I want. I think it is time for monkey business, yes. I think you're right. I do need to shake things up here with a little bit of monkey business. Can I interrupt the tree as well?
Not picking that up. I'd climb it myself, but I don't want to take all the fun away from Glottis. That wheel should really be shaking the tree down, don't you think?
What the fuck are those things though? What's this? That one, that one, that one, that one. I think that's the order it goes in. Is that it? Or maybe it's no. Oops. Is that it? Dun 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 dun. Please. That's what it is, I guess? This is such a baffling moon puzzle. There's no logic here. What am I even like trying to interact with? Boop 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 boop. Boop a doop boop boop. Have you just linked me like the solution? Oh, I've... Is the idea to pull the lever when it's in a certain orientation? Is that it? I'm gonna save the fucking game, dude. No, I think it always drops him in a certain direction. That in it. Where did the slots go? No, never mind. I don't actually know what that fucking resin drop even is, dude. I guess they're like all going off at once in the picture? I don't even know. The picture doesn't really seem to show anything other than the wheelbarrow not being on any of the tracks. Dude, are these things just a fucking red herring again? Is it just take this thing off the tracks and then do it? Is that it?
That was a dirty trick, Manny.
I don't know how that happened, but I think it was an electrical short.
Oh, okay.
It does have a new excuse every time, at least. Man, you have to tell me, what the fuck are those dippity doop does on the tree? What do they do?
That wheel should really be shaking the tree down, don't you think?
Maybe I should talk to Goddess. Oh my god, can you have any worse pathing, Manny?
What are they doing to that tree?
Oh, city boy. You work all day in a 60-story skyscraper, but didn't you ever wonder what it was made of? The marrow of these trees, man. They suck it out. It's like cement.
Is that why the town's called El Marro?
Huh? Never thought of that. Maybe so.
Maybe so.
This place gives me the creep.
I'm ready.
Boop, 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 boop.
Hey, while you have that off, let me try moving those weights around some more. Now, no monkey business this time, Calavera.
I'll look at that solution in a bit here. I'm just gonna wait a bit until I do this. Okay, I can't. I don't have an option to it all the time.
Still not enough.
And maybe... Hey, while you have that off, let me try moving those weights around.
Okay. I'm pretty sure I did the... I didn't do exactly the thing in the solution, but that is fucking moon logic. I tried two different orientations there, but I'd not done this one. No, I was thinking of doing this, but I thought I was just doing something wrong, and it seemed really dumb to try it this way. No, I did not do this! So I think what I need to do is do bloop, 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 right? I don't know for what godforsaken reason that's a solution, but... Oh, okay. Wow, that's something.
Manny, until now we scraped along the ground like rats. But from now on, we soar. Like eagles. Yeah. Like eagles on pogo sticks!
Nice, beautiful.
What a relief. I was getting concerned that our transportation wasn't ostentatious enough.
Yeah, me too.
Get in! Or are you afraid of heights?
Now we're talking. Alright, what's up this path here? I'll have a look before I save the game and I pause the stream until next stream. It just hit 3 hours. Oh, what's this?
Manny, what are you doing?
Aye, don't sneak up on me like that.
Don't you know what's on the other side of that
No
gate?
idea, I'm just walking around.
Way out of the forest.
Demon beavers, Manny? They'll make you into a dam.
Relax, Geppetto. I'm not made of wood.
But Manny, they don't use wood.
They use the bones, because that's the money. And so are the worms. Must wait for the first chapter? That's excellent. Yeah, I was kind of confident I would be able to finish the chapter actually. Because I managed to get out of the little first town area. But I guess not quite all the way there, yeah. Not quite. Don't I actually have a bone I can throw these beavers? Before I do anything, I'm going to throw the bone to these beavers and see what happens.
I like to save bones for special occasions.
Like this? Okay, they just warped me out of there. Yeah, I think this is also a promising start for this game, and yeah, I'm enjoying myself very much for this game, even when the puzzles are real dumb. I think that this.
I'm not going down there until you get rid of them.
Okay, what? Okay, I was skipping for dollars. I'm not sure what he's talking about there. Yeah, even if some puzzles are silly, I just really enjoy this sort of vibe and mood of Grim Fandango. It's really great. All the characters are really charming and cool. And I think just a game that's really neat. Even if I get a puzzle like that, we just look up what the solution is and we move on, because what the fuck, that was bizarre. Yeah, seems very promising. What? Oh my god. I think I know the solution to the puzzle over here.
I don't really, not right now. Not right now. That's not right.
Oh, I can't put the sign down.
Not here. That's no way to treat the bone wagon.
I figured I could maybe like put down like a sign in this big area here to like point to the area that I should go to. Oh, maybe I still can. There we go. Sold it. Save game. Boop. I did it. So you just fast forward to the part where you're not trapped in XD Spork logic. That fucking tree puzzle, man. What the fuck is happening there? It was just like, well, why don't you just guess in which order you like the beep booping gizmos to go in? Beep boop. Why don't you just guess? Just spend 20 minutes guessing the beep boop, and to see which one is correct. I mean, at some point you'll get it. Yeah, like, fuck that, dude. That's so dumb. That's so fucking dumb. Motherfuckers, man. Absolute fucking bastards. But I think most of the time, there's some hits. There's some hits and misses in any adventure game, but I think this game is like most of the hits, right? I think, so even if there's a lot of misses, there's also a lot of hits, and that's what counts. I'm just gonna see if I solved this puzzle already. I'm just gonna see if I'm a fucking genius, dude. Where is that even pointing at? Here? Where's it there? Okay, this one. I can't see, the sign isn't helpful. What if I click on the sign? can't. I just ran over the sign. Is that good? Oh my god, what is this puzzle? I just ran over the sign. But I can exit the car, right? And then put the sign back up, right? Please. I can, okay, good. That just says in that direction though. Doesn't it? Manny, what the fuck is your pathing? How does he walk around like that? What is he doing, dude? Is he walking all the way around the car? Dude, it's the fucking worst. I hate that he doesn't run to interact with things. He just walks so slowly. Oh. It's just not part of the turbo team, I guess, you know. Okay, I think I get it. There's multiple signs on this thing, right? But is it like, look at it, like memorize the order, right?
Well, it's pointing somewhere.
Oh my god, what the fuck is this? Never mind, we haven't solved the puzzle at all. Yeah, I have no idea. I'm saving the game. And we'll play some more of this later. I'm going to be spending a lot of time with the family during Easter. So we'll see if I stream on Thursday. I might. We'll see. Yeah, I think I will. I'm going around all over the place on Thursday. But I think I'd like to fit in a stream somewhere. So I think if I don't stream on Thursday, maybe I'll do it in the weekend. So yeah. I'll see you then. Cheers. Thank you for hanging out. Hope you had a great time with Grim Fandango. And I'll see you next Tuesday if I'm not streaming on Thursday. Take it easy. Good night. Bye.